how's everyone doing? Okay? Doing okay? Good. All right. Oh, nice. Well done. Okay. All right, here she is. Huh?
Am I supposed to come up here or stay down here?
Up here. I was saving your space for you. Can I take your water? Got it? Okay. And you're going to help, right?
Okay, I hope I can get this done.
Go, girl.
Well, thank you. Perhaps I should start. I'm Jody Williams. I've worked on the Bear River for a long time, many decades. Maybe I should start with a disclaimer that I'm not officially speaking on behalf of the Bear River Commission, but most of the slides and comments here are simply informational. They're certainly not controversial. However, throughout my presentation, I'm going to give a few of my very own opinions, completely unofficial. Any opinion is mine, not that of the Commission. The disclaimer I really need to give, however, is that I recently had some very painful surgery. And so if I say something nonsensical, wrong, just plain stupid, all of which are possibilities, I will claim later that it was the pills talking. So for a long, long time, while no one was thinking about Great Salt Lake or its relationship to the Bear River Compact, we all know that happened. But back then we looked at ecosystems and life as really compartmentalized. And it was easy to say, well, Bear River's Bear River and Great Salt Lake's Great Salt Lake. And there weren't any water rights past the last irrigation diversion on the Bear River, after all, and the water rights for the Bear River Migratory Bird Refuge hadn't been established or quantified at the time of the original Bear River Compact. I think it was the HCR 10 report that was the first out loud acknowledgement of the connection, when we all really started thinking about it. Okay, next time I do this, if ever, I want Jake to do my slides so they can fly around. Yay! So why is the Bear River Commission even included in the Great Salt Lake Issues Forum this year? Well, last fall, as Commissioner Steed was developing the strategic plan, and it was Thanksgiving, as he was talking about, and I was driving to Cedar City to see my mother. I get this phone call. He goes, "Hey, Jody, what happens on Great Salt Lake is going to impact all of the upstream basin. So how does the commissioner officially contact and talk to Idaho and Wyoming?" And after he asked, a whole lot of other people asked. Lynn, several people. But fortunately, the Bear River Compact provides a mechanism to formally engage, and that is through the management committee. So that's what miraculously made it into the commissioner's strategic plan. So I'm here to give a little background that may be helpful if the Great Salt Lake Commish comes a-callin'. First, we'll do a little background, basic Bear River hydrology. You probably all know it. And Teresa Wilhelmsen, who's going to speak after me, she's going to have great slides that will fly around and do all kinds of fancy things, and she really knows this. But the Bear River is 500 miles long. It goes across state lines many times before it ends up just 90 miles from its source in the Uintas. It's the largest river in North America that doesn't flow to an ocean. Now, at one time, thousands of years ago, the Bear River didn't make that big turn at the top of the map. It just continued north a very short distance to the Portneuf River in southeast Idaho. The Portneuf, of course, is tributary to the Snake. The Snake joins the Columbia, so at one time the Bear River really did make it to the Pacific Ocean. But then volcanic activity near Soda Springs turned the river back on itself and down toward Lake Bonneville. And this is interesting because when Bear River is in an extended flooding period, engineers bring out these studies that show downstream flooding could be avoided if we just dug this canal over to the Portneuf River and dumped the extra Bear River water into the Portneuf River. Unfortunately, during most flooding periods, southeast Idaho and the Portneuf River, they're also in surcharge and they don't want the water. But conversely, when the Bear River Basin is in extended drought and Great Salt Lake is in peril, those same canal studies come out with the idea that Utah could just go bring Portneuf River water down, flow it into Great Salt Lake, and alleviate some water shortages. And again, unfortunately, most of the same weather patterns that are affecting the Bear River and Great Salt Lake are at the same time affecting the Portneuf River. And so those same Portneuf River folks go, we haven't got any water to spare. Now, this is important whether it's in this talk or in the future. You need to keep this in mind. And this slide's from Conley, thank goodness. Bear River does not naturally flow into or out of Bear Lake. A lot of people go to Bear Lake and they go, oh, this is the source of the Bear River. Well, it's not. In fact, Bear River flows north of Bear Lake, and then it is diverted out of, the water's diverted out of the river, flows in the Rainbow Canal, down into what we call Mud Lake, that is also the Bear River National Wildlife Refuge. It hangs out there for a while, and then it goes over the Inlet Causeway and is stored in Bear Lake. And this is how Bear Lake, the top part of Bear Lake, is operated as a storage reservoir on top of an old important lake. And it is also how Pacific Corp delivers supplemental irrigation water to 150,000 acres of irrigation downstream. So you need to keep this in mind. Now, from time to time in its many thousands of years history, Bear River has been connected with Bear Lake, but not now. So the compact. Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3 of our Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, authorizes states to enter into agreements with other states. And this compacting clause is the basis of most, if not all, of our river compacts. It's also cited as authority for the Colorado River Compact. But it takes a really long time to negotiate a compact on a river, an interstate compact. And although it's a constitutional process, the states have control throughout. First, there are legal and environmental and engineering studies up the yin-yang. And then after get all these studies done, there's a request to Congress from the compacting states for permission to begin negotiations for a compact. After the states formally negotiate the compact, they hold public meetings. The compact was, in our case, was signed by the state negotiators, and then it was presented to the Utah legislature, also the legislatures of Idaho and Wyoming. And after it passed the legislatures, then the governor signed it, and then the compact was sent to Congress, where additional hearings were held. Now, Congress ratified the compact. It didn't approve it, but it ratified the state's actions. And then the compact was signed by the president. In case of the Bear River Compact, the first one was signed a long time ago by President Eisenhower. Purposes of the Bear River Compact. Well, Article 1 of the Bear River Compact sets out the purposes, and these purposes are similar to almost every other river compact. I guess everybody wants comity to prevent future and present controversy. These are noble goals, but people and states often simply fight over water. So getting back to who do we hope that the commish comes and talks to? The Bear River Compact's business is carried out by its commissioners. There are 3 commissioners from each compacting state, and a federal commissioner representing the United States. That's me. And in case you were wondering what a federal commissioner is doing in these red states in the West on the Bear River, I would answer that, well, I just help promote comity and agreement among the parties, and I get to conduct the meetings and not vote. The Bear River Commission operates by committee. The management committee that the commissioner is supposed to meet with to discuss the regional importance of Great Salt Lake to the states is composed of each of the state's 3 Bear River commissioners and the federal commissioner. These Bear River commissioners are the state engineers of each of the 3 states. Unlike other river compacts, when you talk about the Bear River Compact and the Bear River Commission, of almost equal importance to the compact are, and this is in my opinion, are the 2 Bear River decrees. These decrees were general adjudications, and they formed the basis for the compact by quantifying the water rights and the irrigated acreage so the states would have something to negotiate about. But it was because the power company was granted and had by far and away the largest water rights in the basin, 1.4 million acre feet of storage and 5,000 second feet of direct flow water rights. And this was an early priority water right. Then as they negotiated the Bear River Compact, everybody was saying, well, how are we going to provide for new development above Bear Lake? How do you deal with that? And that is one of the things that the original compact addressed. Now, it's a very difficult issue. Idaho has just started its re-adjudication of the Bear River, and Utah's re-adjudication is almost complete except for the book on Pacific Corp's Bear Lake water rights. So these decrees continue to have great significance today. So again, after many years of negotiations, the 3 states finally were able to reach an agreement on a compact. And the original compact was mostly about apportioning direct flow or natural flow, surface flow water rights. That's what they divided up. And it basically created 3 little independent river basins that are kind of regulated independently. I mean, they're all part of the compact and they're all part of the water rights, but they have their own regulations. Conley, if I'm goofing up, correct me. Now, each state still has the authority to distribute its own water rights. The Bear River Compact does not take that away from the states, nor could it. But in a declared water emergency, the states will distribute water without regard to state line on a priority basis, according to the distribution schedule passed by the Commission. Now, what's a water emergency? Basically, a water emergency is a call on the river. We all think we know a little bit about water law, and so if you are You are a downstream user with a later priority water right, and an upstream user uses too much water and you don't get your water. You ask the state engineer to call out or make a call, tell that guy to shut off. Well, what if that different user is in a different state? What if that upstream user is in a different state? It just doesn't work for state engineers to go guns blazing into another state and shut off water. So the compact water emergency procedures provide that early priority water user with a remedy. And without the compact procedures to provide this remedy to regulate water without regard to state line in a water emergency, the aggrieved water user would have no other remedy except to convince his state to go to the U.S. Supreme Court and file original jurisdiction litigation against the other state. Now you think this is kind of weird and far out, but it isn't. Because this situation actually happened 4 years ago. Wyoming and Utah almost went to the Supreme Court over water on a tributary to a tributary of the Bear River. And we were at the meeting, and we had, I think Candace was packing heat in her purse, and I was really glad. So, I'll skip ahead here. It made me feel safe. The amended Bear River Compact apportions depletion, not flow. So we always talk about who has the first right to develop and the second right to develop. Well, that's depletion, not just flow. I want to say something quick about Bear Lake Settlement Agreement. The Bear Lake Settlement Agreement, there were always disputes between the Bear Lake property owners who didn't have, they were the folks without water rights, and the power company and the irrigators, the folks with the water rights. And finally, that kind of blew up, and the Bear Lake interests were successful in challenging a dredging permit on Bear Lake. Well, suddenly the fact that they didn't actually own their own water rights was a big deal. And they got standing through the Bear Lake Settlement Agreement. The Bear Lake Settlement Agreement is hugely important on the Bear River because for the first time it established interstate accounting models that had to agree. For years and years, Idaho had a model and Utah had a model, and they were both right, but they were 40,000 acre feet a year off. So it did that. It got everybody who used Bear Lake storage water under contract, and it limited storage releases by 2 feet out of the storage pool in Bear Lake. But the real important thing about the Bear Lake Settlement Agreement is that it got people talking to each other. And I cannot stress how important that is. It's really, really important because they created the Bear Lake Preservation Advisory Committee, the irrigators, the power company, and the Bear Lake Interest, Bear Lake Watch, meet every year, and they talk about really tough issues. They negotiate, and guess what? They're exercising comedy, and they aren't even states. It's really great. It's a very significant agreement. Quick note about Bear Lake. I know we're here to talk about Great Salt Lake, but one of the elephants in the room is whether Bear Lake can be the simple water solution for Great Salt Lake. And I don't think it can. It's risky anyway. It could put Bear Lake on the map and on the road to getting into a situation that is just as precarious as we have on Great Salt Lake. And Bear Lake is the hinge of the Bear River Compact. It also protects the rights of Wyoming to use water. So some people think that if you want to protect Bear Lake, you are anti-Great Salt Lake, and that is simply not the case. We have to solve these problems together. Bear Lake's unique. It is an ancient lake. It's the oldest continuously wet lake in North America, and it is one of the 5 oldest lakes in the world. So, like Lake Baikal, and there are many scientific studies that have been done on this. So, and there are 4 endemic species in Bear Lake. So we have to be careful. We don't want to create 4 more Wilson phalaropes. So we've really got to coordinate. We have to be careful. And with that, I go back to the original slide. Action, let's coordinate. We're ready for you, Commish. The Management Committee of the Bear River Commission has already talked about the strategic plan, and the upriver states are ready to talk and try to be a part of the solution. Thank you. Don't fall.
I would have caught you. Okay, and then you're welcome to use the clicker. Okay. Okay. Can you hear me okay? Sometimes I'm a little short for the mics, but I think this is going to work. So I saw everybody else kind of hunched over. So I think this is the perfect height for me. So I'm Teresa Wilhelmsen. I serve as the Utah State Engineer and Director of the Division of Water Rights. And I don't know if a state engineer has presented at this conference before, but I'm happy to be here. Yeah. So thank you for the invitation to come talk about what we do. And maybe let me just point out, the title that was on the program was Water Distribution and Accounting. So I thought that's what they wanted me to talk about. So I will. The efforts that we do to distribute the water in the state and also do the accountability of that, the systems. So I am going to just highlight for those of you who may not be as familiar, just really quickly. So the Office of the State Engineer has existed since 1897. I think we're one of the oldest state agencies in state government. It was merged in the 60s into the Division of Water Rights, but the Office of the State Engineer still exists within that agency. I serve as state engineer. I'm appointed for a 4-year term and nominated by the governor and confirmed by the Senate. So I just started in February my 2nd 4-year term as state engineer. So happy to not have work-life balance for the next 4 years, I guess. I don't know. So the Division of Water Rights, we function with 6 main sections within our division. They are applications and records, adjudication, that's that second A word that nobody can remember, field services, technical services, dam safety, and data services. So we also have 7 regional offices across the state. This is just a slide that shows the evolution of water law in Utah. So the Mormon pioneers came in 1847. The territory was organized in 1850. Statehood began in 1896, and the first state engineer was appointed in 1897. The duties of that state engineer were the safety of dams, building dams, and irrigation surveys, among other things like stream measurement. If you look in the records of our division, we have biennial reports that go back to 1897 that give us a history of what has happened during those years within the office and within the state. We did have a lapse of those biennial reports, probably the last 10 years, 15 years, 20 years maybe, but we're actually going to publish one here to cover these last 2 years, which I think are going to be really telling for the record, to maintain on the record, an extremely dry year and an extremely wet year. So we'll share that once we do that. Another really important thing to keep in mind with Utah water law are these next 2 dates. In 1903 is when a comprehensive water code was put into place that covered surface waters. In 1935, it covered groundwater. Not many Western states manage surface and groundwater under a water right system. In some states, didn't even start managing their groundwater till 10 years ago or so. So having that oversight of both surface and groundwater really helps us understand the systems more clearly, who's using what water where, whether it's surface or groundwater. And so it does help us when we get to the point that we need to do better conjunctive management of those water rights, that we can do that because we have the record. Many states exempt de minimis uses, so they really have no idea how much is being drawn from the aquifers, but we do. And so I think that just really puts us ahead of other states in being able to tackle that specific issue. So let me just give some updates of what we're working on at the State Engineer's Office. Recently, we developed a strategic action plan. Believe it or not, our division is so kind of ingrained in the things we do every day. There's probably 10,000, almost 10,000 decisions that the state engineer makes in a day. So while I'm standing here, there's about, if you think about that number, about 250 decisions going out today from my office while I'm standing here. So every day that is happening. We developed this strategic plan for a number of reasons. One of those is to organize our agency, really identify what areas we need to focus on, where we may need some legislative help, whether it's funding or policy changes, and also it's going to help us with our young staff. There are very few of us. I've been in water rights for 27 years. I think there's maybe 2 others that are across the state that have the longevity that I do as well, or close to. I think I'm second. Our regional engineer in Richfield actually is ahead of me. But it really is helping us as we bring on new staff for them to also have a focus and an understanding of where we are to work and where we are to focus. So we will be releasing this onto our website shortly. We're just working in making a little bit more straightforward plan. So that's coming. The other thing that has happened this last year is our friends that were sitting up here a little earlier, they did a legislative audit on our agency. This last year, we actually had 5 different audits that were going on. This one focused on our data. You can imagine having an agency that's been around since 1897, what our data looks like over the years. So we know, and this audit identified I would bet every one of you in this audience uses our data. You probably just don't know it. But we need to get a better job at defining what that data is. So I'll talk a little bit more about that, but this has been a real focus for us. So let me just talk about some legislative changes recently. In-stream flow changes to the statute that allows for more robust in-stream flow applications to be filed and happen within the state of Utah. This, I think, has been and I don't know if Tim Hawks is still here or not, but and Joel Ferry's not here, but this has been one of those changes to statute that I think has really moved the needle. And when you think about it, folks will say that water law's old, it just needs to go out, you need to throw it out, you need to start over. But I think this is an example of a modification to statute, an institutional shift to a system that is making a difference. I think we have, and this may not sound like a lot, but I think we have now 6 or 8 change applications for in-stream flow for us to move water to the Great Salt Lake that have been filed. There are not many other administrative mechanisms that are doing that and that amount of water. So had to give a shout out to the in-stream flows. Another bill that was passed this year, it's been mentioned a couple of times, Representative Snyder worked on House Bill 453. That also included that I get the pleasure of developing over the next 18 months a Great Salt Lake distribution management plan for the water rights that are within the lake and how to regulate those with some considerations to the elements of the Great Salt Lake. How do I regulate those based on priority? That's not going to be an easy job. There's going to be a lot of you in those public meetings and a lot of other people in those public meetings too. But we're committed, we'll get it done. We'll have a distribution plan by October 25th of 2025. But we will be announcing that plan and also the public meetings for folks to attend. So another change to water law recently is saved water. This came about a year ago, and it literally formed in about 4 days with some policymakers during the legislature. I think it was like the last week of the session or last 2 weeks of the session. I know there were several of us that spent the entire weekend trying to make sure we didn't completely screw everything up. But we came up with a saved water definition and pointing to a mechanism of filing a change application where the state engineer will quantify that amount of saved water that I will then shepherd to the lake or wherever that intended purpose is. This last year, we modified the saved water to bring it from the Ag Optimization Code, which you're going to hear from Hannah in a little bit, and bring it into the General Water Code. How do we handle that under the water rights system? So now we have, I will say, I have better direction. It may still confuse some folks, but it's clear as pristine water to me. But more to come. So, and again, I'm going to give a shout out to these 3 folks that were sitting up here earlier. Representative Snyder, the speaker, and also Tim Hawks. They have been a huge friend to my agency. When you think about the state engineer's office, we hadn't probably increased the number of staff since the 70s or 80s. But in the last 5 years, those folks have been able to make significant investments. I have a deputy now that's dedicated to working in the Great Salt Lake Basin. Who knew we could do that? That was Tim Hawks that enabled that. The funding here for measurement and telemetry for us to do more real-time measurement. If you're familiar with distribution on the system, for many, many years all across the state, there has been what we call fat in the system, and that is kind of that slush water that just gets absorbed in the system. With telemetry and measurement, we can actually identify where that is and make sure that it's going to the purpose that it's intended to do. So the investments that they've made have seriously never been heard of in my agency before, these amounts. We're going to have just one of them on here, 1 million ongoing for measurement and telemetry. That's incredible. Now, it comes with consequences in a way that Since 1897, we haven't had these resources. Now we have a huge bucket of money, and we're trying to find people that will help us do it. So I know everyone's struggling to hire good qualified people, and we're definitely in that boat as well, to help us spend this money and get meaningful data and real-time data that is transparent and available to anyone. Let me just give a little update. Governor's proclamation. So 2 years ago, the governor issued a proclamation at the recommendation of the state engineer, closing the Great Salt Lake Basin to new appropriations. There are some caveats to that. Non-consumptive rights can still be applied for, and then some small domestics. So the efforts of the state engineer, what we've been doing since that time is public meetings in each of the communities that are affected by this proclamation, to modify state engineer appropriation policies, to close those areas to new appropriations or what could be available. With Cache County, attended a couple of public meetings there, met with the county commission, the water district, and one of the things that was a gap in our knowledge was of the groundwater. So we're received some funding this year through the legislature, and Utah State, University of Utah, USGS, and us will conduct a study to help us better understand the groundwater system. So we're still working through a lot of this proclamation work. We're committed to have these public meetings, get public feedback, and determine where do we go forward. One of my tasks this last year was to give a report to the governor on whether the proclamation should stay in place. And I did do that, and the recommendation was that it should still stay in place till we get more information. So just a quick update there. So now I'm going to talk about just us working on the ground and analyzing the data that we have. And we do that in kind of three basic buckets. So distribution. The state engineer appoints river commissioners. They're actually employees of the state engineer. Currently, we have 36 commissioners that administer 42 distribution systems across the state. 13 of those systems are in the Great Salt Lake Basin, and we have 11 commissioners. The reason why we have 2 commissioners that do 2 systems, and that's okay, for them to manage 2 systems. And then there's 13 deputy commissioners. All of these folks are employees of the state engineer. They operate under the direction of the state engineer, and they manage the water rights within those systems. They are also helping to make sure that we have accurate measurement on these systems so that we can better manage them. And if you look at some of our biannual reports, you see that the state engineer has been doing this function the entire time, and we have detailed summaries in these published reports for us to go back to. So measurement and automation, you have to have measurement to understand what the amount of water is, and are the water rights, first of all, receiving the water that they're supposed to be receiving, or are they taking more water than they're supposed to be taking? A lot of times we find once you start measuring, it's the second part. And those are hard conversations that, hey folks, your water right doesn't allow you to take what you've been taking for the last 20 years. So we have to cut them back to what their water right allows. Now, you can imagine how hard those conversations are, and maybe why there's some pushback on measuring, because maybe people don't really want other people to know. But I have seen a shift in probably the last few years that more and more people are supporting measurement because somebody else has been taking their water and they want to know who that somebody else is. And so we are getting better measurement, and then this automation really does help us upload that data to our database. do these distribution accounting models, which I'll talk about in a minute, in order for us to distribute that water more accurately. This is just a photo. Erin will recognize this bridge. It's in her backyard there at the refuge. This is one of the measurement sites that we just recently installed this last year. This is at the Bear River Refuge. And I have to say it's eluded us in measurement for up until last year. And so this is really going to help us manage that diversion. The refuge has one of the senior rights on the system that we need to make sure gets their water, but also that the calls that they made are appropriate. This is one that our measurement and telemetry team just installed, and I think it's gone live now. We were having a little bit of trouble with the actual ultrasonic readers, but I think that we've worked that out. We got some replacement parts, and it's available. So this last couple of years, we've installed 31 new automated gauges within the Great Salt Lake Basin. And I also have to say, we don't just work in the Great Salt Lake Basin. We are a statewide program. So we also get to do Colorado River work and Sevier River work. So we have identified, also this slide indicates, 50 automated measurements in the Colorado River basin. But as all of you know, Colorado River water is imported to this basin. So it's critical that we have measurement across the state and measurement that is consistent. We're just finishing up a Great Salt Lake Basin measurement gap analysis with Utah State University. We should have that deliverable by June 30th. Beth is saying yes. But we will have that, and then we will prioritize the missing measurement and work to use some of that funding that these three folks that were up here earlier acquired for us in the agency to get better measurement. But I thank Utah State University for their willingness to work with us to do some of these projects that we have needed to do for quite some time. Just another update on our water rights network. Obviously, the Division of Water Rights is the expert in water aid data and water rights, the understanding of those water rights. This water right network that we are continuing to refine is going to give more clarity to the water rights, how much they receive, how much is being diverted, what canals are flowing. It will be a whole kind of hydrographic network that includes priority and water rights information. There are a lot of other efforts that are going on around the state, and we're really working collaboratively with some of these other agencies to try to make sure that we have one data set. We can't necessarily have water rights coming out with these definition of water rights and then have another agency that's interpreted that data differently. So we're really trying to work very closely so that we have the same data that everybody is using and the same definition of that data. The other thing that we're working on, and I just noticed our timekeeper down here. The other thing that we're working on with Utah State University is a gap analysis. This is going to help us organize our data. Sometimes I've described this as a box of Legos, that we know what that data is and what it will build, like a pirate ship or whatever you built with your kid, right? But what we're challenged with now and tasked with is making sure that everybody understands that there's a pirate ship in there or there's a Star Wars ship in our data for us to share that data. So accounting models, this is another that I'm going to kind of go quickly on a few slides and really hit one last one. Accounting models, these are models that we build internally. They're distribution accounting models that take into account how water rights have been diverted so that we can go back and look. And in our minds, we see that network of systems and how best can we maximize that system to get water where it needs to go, or what could be some options for like the commissioner or others to look at. We're documenting this process with Utah State University. We're also looking at changes to depletion with Utah State University. And then I want to highlight this last A word. This is the water rights adjudication. It's been going on for quite some time, and sometimes people think, what the heck are you guys doing with that? But if we don't keep the focus on finishing these adjudications, we're not going to have a clear definition of what the water rights are within the state so that we know how to use that system to get water where it may need to go. And so we're full throttle in the adjudication in the Salt Lake Valley, on the Provo River system, Utah Valley, and also what Jody mentioned in the Bear River system, finishing those adjudications. So we're committed to doing, continuing those adjudications. So just looking forward, that's just a summary slide, and that's what I have for you. So appreciate your time, and seriously, thank you for inviting me to this. Are you switching? I don't know if I'm supposed to take questions. Would it be around? Okay.
Lynn asked me to mention that all of our presentations are being recorded and will be available on our website following the event. Teresa also said she'll be around this afternoon if anybody wants to snag her for questions later. Our next presenter is Emily Lewis. There's a clicker right here if you'd like to.
Hi, you guys. My name is Emily Lewis. I'm with the law firm of ClydeSnow and Sessions, and I love seeing so many familiar faces, but also a lot of faces I haven't seen, which I love that because I feel like as water, we can sometimes get siloed into the same groups of people, and it's great to have a broader conversation with all kinds of folks who are interested in the topic. Before I start, I just want to say that I'm really glad that Teresa and her office is here because those of you who don't deal with the state engineer's office on a regular basis don't really realize how awesome they are and how much work they really do get done for the state of Utah. And they do the yeoman's work of the brass tacks of moving water from point A to point B, of getting those applications done. And I just really think that it's important to highlight how much work they get done. And if you ever have a legislator, tell them to give them even more money. Teresa's slide needs even more zeros on it. So what I'm going to talk to you guys today about is kind of really taking off a little bit from what Teresa was talking about. She kind of covered some of the basics of kind of where our water law started and highlighted a couple key issues. But this is some work that we did in the fall as part of the Great Salt Lake Basin Integrated Plan, and I'll talk about that in a second. But really what we want to do is, there's been a lot of activity in water in the last 5 years, and there's been a lot of questions of what are we doing? How are we working? How are things going? And this is really a response to that because we've been doing a lot. This doesn't include all of the 2024 bills, but I think that the most of the work that we did, up until 2023, I'll highlight a couple 2024 ones verbally, but you'll see it anyway. So what are we doing here? So what we really wanted to do as part of the Great Salt Lake Basin Integrated Plan is do kind of an inventory and assessment of what are all the water laws that we have passed in the last 5 years. And Teresa mentioned earlier that, often water law kind of gets a bad rap as being antiquated and being old, and the prior appropriation doctrine doesn't fit, what happens in today's world in 2024. I personally disagree with that and think it's an incredibly flexible doctrine. It's one of those things where we had these water rights rights, and they are conditional property rights that are based on this concept of beneficial use. You get to use the public's water if you put it to a use that benefits the public. And we as society can change what we think about what benefits the public. And also the other thing about the prior appropriation doctrine, and I think it's not quite enough play here, is that it is an incredibly stable doctrine. You know exactly what you're getting when you know and you look at a specific water right. The oldest water rights in the system get all of their water first before the next water right in the system gets any of their water if we're in times of shortage. And so because it's stable, you can use other means of authorities like contracts or exchanges or markets to really move around these water rights in a way that fits contemporary needs. And I think it's just really important when we have conversations about water is that we work in a very stable, orderly system now, and to work with that system is going to be the fastest way to achieve some of our goals for today. So what I want to talk about here is that, what we produced last fall for the Great Salt Lake Basin Integrated Plan is a physical summary and document that's a comprehensive of the programs that we've passed and the laws we passed in the last 5 years. It's an interactive document. The links here I'll show you. You can go and actually go to the bills, go to the websites, go to all the different programs that have been created. And honestly, one of the reasons we wanted to do this is we wanted something physical. You could physically print and drop on people's desks. When I hear people are like, Utah sitting on their hands, and I'm like, I don't know what hands you're talking about because mine are really busy, like very, very busy. So I just think some physical representation and a way to physically see what we've done is really important. It's really awesome that, people can throw pictures of the Great Salt Lake up and we can see the declining lake levels and we can see, kind of the impacts. It's really hard to visualize law, like very, very hard. and we've made a lot of progress. And so this is also kind of one of the reasons for doing this is just to have a physical manifestation that we could look at physically, understand, and kind of move ahead. And just as a brief summary, wow. Good work, team. We've accomplished a lot in the last 5-ish or so years. And state websites, I don't know if you guys have been looking at the state websites in the last couple of years. Summer Dawn, who's not here, I don't know if she is, but her and her team, our websites are incredible. And they've done a wonderful job of making the information we've done very accessible to the public. We've made more programs than we can keep track of, and we've given so much money, we're talking in Bs, lots of Bs for the amount of money for water. So real quickly, I mentioned earlier, this work was kind of conducted as part of the Great Salt Lake Basin Integrated Plan. This was HB 429 that was passed in 2022. The initial work plan was released in 2023. We've done some recent updates to the plan and the website that are now up on the Great Salt Lake Basin Integrated Plan. This is a work through Jacobs Engineering. I saw Jeff somewhere. There's Jeff. So he's the mastermind of all these good things with a really wonderful working team of agencies and people and staff. And so this is part of the plan. Approach was to inventory, categorize the water laws, and then show progress on kind of what we've done. So how did we approach kind of like this task? Like, how are we going to make these kind of esoteric concepts of law very accessible and cognizable and categorizable to the general public? And so what we did is kind of like looking at all the things that have happened in the last couple of years. Our team here at ClydeSnow, working with Jacobs and the state agencies, decided that we really wanted to look at kind of like the laws fell kind of into 5 key topics and areas. There's changes to Utah water law, which are basically like changes to the concepts of, prior appropriation doctrine, kind of the bones and the structure of how we think about what water rights are, how we define them as a society, what the changes we've made to make the doctrine more flexible. The second kind of category of laws that we've had a lot of activity in is laws incentivizing water conservation. We all know that we live in a very dry state here in the state of Utah. We're going to have to make our water resources go a lot further if we're going to meet all of our demands and all of our population growth. So, conservation is a really big component of this. Water marketing, what are we doing kind of outside, command and control structures to incentivize water changes, but market principles. Coordination. Water, Teresa was up here a few moments ago. She talked about one agency that touches water. We've got like 10 or 15 agencies that touch water at the end of the day, or groups and organizations, and everybody touches water. So how do we better coordinate that? And then also specifically, Great Salt Lake Management. It's its own unique body with its own unique needs and concerns, and what have we done to specifically address the Great Salt Lake? So for that first category, these are changes to water law, key principles, functions of the prior appropriation doctrine. Teresa mentioned a couple of these, but there was about 6-ish subcategories of changes that we made to the law. So, recognizing a right to in-stream flows. This is something that was a really big deal. As I mentioned kind of at the start of this conversation, all of water law is based on and premised on this idea of beneficial use. The public gets the right to appropriate water if you put it to uses that benefit, society as a whole. To date, in-stream flows haven't been a really well-recognized beneficial use here in the state of Utah, and we've made really good efforts to kind of change that and recognize it and find ways to dedicate our existing water rights to uses that help and support the environment through in-stream flows, and specifically also reasons that support state agencies that work with the Great Salt Lake. The other thing we've done is we've done the changes to the concepts of beneficial use outside the kinds and natures of use. Who here has heard the use it or lose it concepts? Right? Like, everyone's taking their full value of their water at all points in time so that they can, maintain the validity of their water right. True. But that's what the law was built to do. I mean, if you think about it, back in the day when all the wagon trains that came over and populated the Salt Lake Valley, we were going to give water rights to the people who actually were going to put them to use. We wanted the farms, we wanted the fields, we wanted the growth. And so if you weren't really going to use it, we were going to take that water and we were going to give it to somebody else so they could. So if you go back to the foundations, that makes a lot of sense. It doesn't make a lot of sense today when we're trying to conserve less, but at the same point in time, we have an entire system built on these private property rights where everyone's given the value of their full right. So we need to figure out ways to incentivize conservation by switching up our concepts for use it or lose it. Forfeiture is kind of the other side of that. If you're not using it, can we take it away from you and do something different? Water prioritization, we're not going to talk a lot about that, but we have a lot of different needs here in the state of Utah. And then groundwater and other changes. So those are kind of the 6-ish categories we looked at for changes. And these are all the bills we've passed in the last 5-ish years on that point. So real quickly, and this doesn't include 2024, not a ton of 2024 ones. They kind of tweak some of the things we've already done regarding saved water and some other issues. But really this 2023 recognition of saved water, that Teresa mentioned it, this is huge. This is really getting at the heart and the meat of what water law is. And so now if you are someone who uses water and you want to implement low flow sprinkler systems, you want to line canals, you want to do something that basically reduces your historic footprint for depletion and reduction, but primarily depletion, so that your same use is depleting less water. Instead of that water being theoretically forfeited to the system to go to the next person, you can actually quantify it and use that or apply that water to a new use. That's the concept in theory. I think we have, 4-ish saved water change applications before the state engineer. I don't know where Teresa went, but this is cutting edge. This is brand new. This is happening today, right now. We are trying to figure this out. Storage is a beneficial use. That was kind of a groundwater change. 2022 mentioned in-stream flows. This one's a little weird, and I'm not quite sure where to put it, but it does touch at kind of our concepts of water law, is that we also added water law judges. So now here in the state of Utah, we have 9 judges who are specifically just going to get an expertise in water law and just hear water cases so that they understand the complexities of it. This is actually really critical. This is going to help us resolve issues a lot faster and with better and more informed decisions. And then we made a bunch of changes to the adjudication statutes in 2016, a little while out, but the adjudication, as Teresa mentioned, is critically important. And then in 2014, we also did some changes to kind of incorporate the concepts of forfeiture and non-use into our administrative processes. So we've done a lot. We've done a lot here. We pretty much have done 100 years worth of water law changes in the last 5 or 6 years. And We are still figuring this out. One of the things too is it's one thing to put water laws on paper at the legislature. It is a totally different thing to implement those on the ground. So please have patience while we work through all the kinks. Okay. All right. So the next one that we looked at was the next big category of laws that we've changed here in the last couple of years are laws incentivizing water conservation. How do we use less water? Where are we using it? How do we use it? Where do we kind of tighten things down? So we've got about, again, kind of 6 good categories of where we've approached the law on this aspect. We've done integrating land and use water planning. When you're doing your county land plan, your municipal plan, are you taking water into account? Are we having our, municipal regulations reflecting low or water-wise landscaping? Secondary metering. This is a huge one. Secondary metering is metering all of our non-culinary water sources for our outdoor grass watering in municipal areas. This was identified as a low-hanging fruit for us to get a better idea of how much water we were using. Weber Basin, I see some Weber Basin folks here. They were out in front of this 10, 12 years ago with their secondary metering programs, and it's been pretty exciting to see. Municipal conservation, how do we promote conservation in our municipal sector? Reuse, regional conservation goals, how do we stack all these various ideas together so that they roll up into like a broader conservation goal so that we can figure out where we're meeting as a state in big picture numbers. And then also agricultural optimization. I think Hannah's going to talk next, but this is a huge part of our water conservation. So the font just gets smaller, you guys. These are all of the laws we have passed in the last 5-ish years that talk to water conservation. I mean, it is not small. We are definitely taking this silver buckshot approach at trying to tighten the screws everywhere we can to get gains here on our water law. So this is big and broad. So we have made changes to our state facility reductions. What do we have control over? What don't we have control over? It's really hard to control individual houses unless you get in with the developers and you get in with, that's a hard nut to crack. We're working on it. Easy to crack state facilities, top down. We've done a lot with our state facility reductions. We've gotten into the layers of HOAs, what HOAs can and can't require for landscaping and outdoor use. We've gotten into agricultural optimization, which is this whole thing. We'll talk about that one in a minute. Municipal exactions. This is really interesting. We have this whole series and set of laws about, we have a lot of development and growth here in the state, and what cities are required to require of developers to use and bring in water for new development. We've kind of got this really interesting kind of like Rubik's Cube of system-specific sizing standards, conservation landscape conservation plans, and then exactions. So that if your town implements a low water-wise outdoor landscaping rule, that means that there will be less water required for outdoor landscaping, which means that there is, developers will need to bring in less water to build new development, which means that cities can ask for less water to be brought in. So all of those are kind of 3 things working together from like a DEQ water provider side, a water conservation ordinance side, and then kind of municipal law in terms of what they can and can't require. This is coming up more and more, and this is a great specific example of kind of how these things bring together, or the exactions. Also, developers don't want to pay for anything, so they don't want to bring in more water, so it works for everybody. Secondary metering, we're going to go there. Yeah. And then the thing that I think is interesting is this all rolls up into our conservation goals. We have big water providers in the state, like the conservation districts. There's only so much water to go around. They have to make that water go really far. So if we are trying to require less water on the ground, that means that's less water that they have to provide as a conservation districts or as a conservancy districts, which means we are meeting kind of our broader goals to reduce our overall footprint. So we've just made a lot of progress in this front. Okay, 5 minutes, I can do this. I'm really partial to this one, but this is water marketing. So I currently sit as the Utah Water Banking Program Manager. That role is kind of phasing out. It's kind of standing up on its own now. Got a couple, month or two more work on that, and we're kind of done. But Utah has taken a very, very proactive approach, opposed to other Western states, of actively promoting and understanding how water markets can work to incentivize conservation, move water between water users, fix supply and demand, supply and demand deficiencies. And I think this is really important because markets work really hand in hand with, the concepts of private property rights, of which the prior appropriation doctrine is based on. So it's a good way to do this. We have a really great new Utah statewide water marketing strategies website. We did 4 pilot projects across the state. We set up 2 water banks and then 2 leasing programs, which really interesting. And then what we did is we distilled all of those lessons from those pilot projects into to kind of printable, materials that if you're interested in doing a water market in your local area, you can print them off. There's specific questions that you ask everybody. It's 5 steps to a water bank or 5 steps to water marketing. It's bigger than just water banks here in the state of Utah. And so I've had many discussions with other folks in other Western states, and no one else has had this be a state-sponsored activity. It happens organically in other states, but no one else has really spent and invested time to kind of make this be a state-sponsored activity. And I think, right here, the Great Salt Lake Watershed Enhancement Act, 2022, I'm sure you guys will talk about this here in the forum or in the issues forum. But they've secured 64,000 acre feet of water, $10 million in projects, and we've got our Water Banking Act. So we're really making progress on these kind of really innovative items. Okay, got 2 more and we'll go. Okay, coordination. I really like this particular topic as well. This is the fourth of the fifth topics we're talking about. So not only do we need to make our laws more responsive to the conditions we find ourselves in, but we also need to make the people helping implement those laws more efficient and responsive to the conditions that we find ourselves in. And we've taken some really great strides here in the state of Utah to really critically think about how do all the people doing the work together, and can we have them work together better? And so, we've kind of broke this into 4 different categories: education and agency coordination, general planning, financing and funding, and then media. So for coordination and general planning, again, this is a lot of statutes. We've done a lot. And there's not much repetition between these slides of statutes. These are all independent statutes that we've passed. Some of the things that we've done here in the state of Utah in the last 5 years is, watershed councils and regional planning. We now have a watershed council bill that sets up watershed councils in various areas across the state so that there is a clearinghouse and forum for people who work in that area to come together and talk about issues and get out ahead of things instead of, finding themselves at a meeting and realizing, oh, you're doing a study on that? That's funny. We're doing a study on that. And so, which does happen. It happens all the time. And, it's a way to kind of say, oh, well, if you're doing that, why don't we do X? And we can kind of complement each other and bring the issues to a forefront ahead of time. The other thing that we've been doing, which I think is really helpful and prescient, and this is something that 2024 did do that I don't have slides on that aren't included. We've got a couple big bills that talk about more studies. Everyone's like, we don't want studies, we want action, but we don't want disparate action that's not coordinated. And so one of the things that Utah has done really well is we've invested in studies. We've invested in studies about infrastructure funding. We invested, the Great Salt Lake Basin Integrated Plan is an investment in studying and then action. And so because we are spending money thinking about the problem on the front end, we're able to actually execute and have impactful actions on the back end. The other thing that we've done, and I think Teresa's slide was great about this, is money. We've been throwing money at water, generational amounts of money. And a lot of that's federal, from the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill. But, we've thrown a lot of money that's federal money, and we've thrown a lot of money that's state money at water. And that's really important because we're putting our money where our mouth is. The other thing that we're doing is that we are incorporating water into existing planning efforts. Instead of creating new things, we're saying you already look at a bunch of big picture things for whatever your silo is. Now county, think about water. Now city, think about water. And so trying to kind of insert water into existing structures that is really helpful to kind of get a comprehensive view. The other thing that I think we've done really well is media. The Great Salt Lake Collaborative, I don't know if they're here today. No, I don't think so. There was it's not Bloomberg, it's a different funding agency. They gave a good grant to, I think, 13 media organizations here in Utah to do some in-depth reporting about the Great Salt Lake. In general, I think it's been very good. I disagree with some of the titles the editors pick. I'll read that title and I'll be like, what? And then I get all angry. And then I read the article and I'm like, oh no, that article is pretty good actually. but the thing is that people are busy, the discourse needs to be nuanced, and we really do need to have good reporting. And I think our reporting has gotten really good here in the state of Utah. Okay, I'm probably gonna be over, so I'll be real quick. The last one we have, the last kind of big chapter kind of bills that we've looked at are Great Salt Lake specific bills. And there's a couple here that passed in 2024 that aren't on the slide, but in general, we have really done a lot that's just actually specific to Great Salt Lake. We had, Brian Steed started us off today, the Great Salt Lake Commissioner. I don't know if this came out because I couldn't attend the first session, but the Great Salt Lake Commissioner is essentially a cabinet level position, you guys. I mean, he responds to the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House. I mean, that is who he reports to. So we as a state decided that this was important enough, we would create this commissioner that he basically is almost at a cabinet level position. That's a really big deal. So that's important. We've really looked at forestry, fire, state land authorities, especially now that we have all these really interesting and new uses on the lake. Lithium is going to be really interesting, mineral extraction. HRC 10 that was mentioned earlier is that a great bill kind of looking at the lake as a whole and what we can do to look at the lake going forward, and that was in 2020. We also in 2020 had a project that we did that was the Great Salt Lake Legal Strategies, which at the time, I almost got fired from 3 clients because I said things like, maybe we should do conserved water. And they're like, no, we'll never do that in Utah. And then in 2023, we're like, we'll just call it saved water, it's fine. So I mean, I think, but this is what I'm talking about is we've been really good about investing in critical thinking, and then 2 or 3 years later, you see those things come to fruition in the law. And so, I mean, overall, I just think it's really important that we as a group, I'm just gonna put this up here as the last slide, look at the cumulative impact of what we've done here and really realize that from where I'm sitting, there's always going to be more work to do. The Great Salt Lake is a very nuanced problem. It's going to take us a really long time to really get good solutions. But we are moving as fast as we possibly can to find solutions. And I think that is a message that really needs to get out. It's hard to see progress when it looks like paper, but that paper will soon turn into water. And I think that's the conversation we also need to have. Success is not just seeing the water at the end of the day, but success is all of those steps that get water to the lake at the end of the day. So, thanks.
Notes on some of the slides, so you should be able to see them here. And then this is your clicker if you'd like. Wonderful, thank you. Thank you, appreciate it. Hi, I'm happy to be here with you today right before lunch. It's always the best spot to be, so I will try to be brief. But my name is Hannah Fries, and I run the Agricultural Water Optimization Program that I think has been mentioned in every single presentation. So me and my staff get to be the boots on the ground that are actually doing that program. I am not a water attorney. I am not a water engineer. None of those things, but I have thrown a siphon tube, I've rolled wheel lines, I've run a pivot, and so I come with some boots on the ground experience. So I'm happy to be here with you today to talk about what we're doing with water optimization, because we definitely understand that we are a major player in the conversations regarding Great Salt Lake. So first, I just want to talk a little bit about agriculture in general and agriculture in Utah. I show you this graph. It is the first time in the history of our nation, in the United States of America, that we are importing more food than we are exporting. So we are relying on other countries outside of our nation for our food supply, which should alarm all of us. We should all be worried and concerned and worried about the capacity we have for agriculture here in the United States and also in the state of Utah. Because we need a secure food supply. It's probably one of the biggest elements of security at a national level and at a level for the state of Utah. And so going forward, I'll just talk a little bit about Utah agriculture and then go into what we're doing with the program. So I took this picture when Lynn reached out to me, it seems like forever ago, and she reached out and asked if I would come speak with you. I took my dogs for a walk. This was in February of this year. And I took this picture and started formulating this idea of why do open lands, like how does agriculture benefit the lake? How are we friends? And I think that there are a lot of ways. And the idea that I came up with is this. And for those that don't know, this is a tile drain. Really quickly, a tile drain is about 6 feet in the ground on agricultural land, and it collects excess groundwater and channels it. This is the reason that we can farm in the Bear River Valley, in Weber County, because we have high groundwater, and so we can channel it and move it so that we can drain those farmlands and grow crops. And so the concept I came up with this as I was walking, I was talking to my dogs. I don't know if any of you do that. I'm talking out loud as I'm walking. The concept that I wanted to share was that all open irrigated agricultural land within the Great Salt Lake watershed helps keep the hydrologic system charged. Irrigation water recharges groundwater. And we have this infrastructure in place that can collect our excess groundwater and move it more quickly into the wetlands surrounding Great Salt Lake. So this is in the middle of February. We're not irrigating. This is just what's happening in the natural system. That pipe runs 24/7, especially in the irrigation season, and that is one of hundreds of tailwater pipes that we have in the Bear River Valley. So we can move it to the wetlands. Actively growing crops accelerates evapotranspiration, which is critical in helping to drive our local water cycle. Crops keep our surface temperatures significantly cooler and they provide opportunities for better precipitation events as those storms move across our valley, especially during hot, dry summer months. If we were completely to do away with agricultural land, some diversions from the natural system would decrease, sure, but in all likelihood, that water would be moved somewhere else in the next several years. As we invest dollars into making agriculture more viable and more sound with our precious water resources, we ensure centuries-old water rights stay in agriculture. This is mutually beneficial to agriculture and the lake. It ensures open lands, groundwater recharge, tailwater return flows, healthy wetlands, open space for wildlife, more effective precipitation events, and a healthier ecosystem for all. And so I hope you just keep that in mind as we talk a little bit more. I put a couple of maps up here. What I feel like are some of the epicenters of the work that we're doing in agriculture and where the Great Salt Lake is. So you can see Corinne here, and then you can see, I'd like to draw, let's see if I have a pointer here. Draw your attention to some of these areas, and then I'm going to show you a map of the Bear River Canal Company. So some of our best agricultural production lands are in Box Elder County. And then this is a map of the Bear River Canal Company main trunk lines. So we take out of Cutler Reservoir, the canal runs through here. But again, I'd like to just show you this area. You can see where these canals end into the wetlands in front of the Great Salt Lake. And during irrigation season, those canals run into the wetlands after we've irrigated. So we've been able to irrigate our crops use the water, they move through the ground or back into the canal, and then come out on the end of the Great Salt Lake and contribute. This is Weber County, and you can see the same effect here on the open lands. You can see the encroachment in Weber County. So much development happening, but you can see the same effects on the wetlands surrounding Great Salt Lake. And so as we use the water in agriculture, we're keenly aware that it goes back into the system and being able to directly benefit the lake through those return flows. I'll talk about some of the projects that we're doing. By and large, the projects that we're doing in Box Elder County and Weber County are surface irrigation improvement projects. So we're maintaining those surface water flood irrigation events that can be very, very efficient and very, very effective and benefit the lake as well. So I'm going to just jump right in and talk to you about my favorite crop. I'm going to talk to you about alfalfa today, and from the farmer's perspective of why we grow alfalfa and the boxes that it checks for us in the agricultural community. So first and foremost, there's been a lot of misinformation about alfalfa, and we'd like to talk to you about some of the things that alfalfa is. So alfalfa is a desert plant. It's very funny when I talk to some groups, they call alfalfa a very water-hungry crop, and then I talk to our farmers and they go, we water it once a crop. Why is alfalfa getting such a bad rap? So it's a desert plant and it's very drought tolerant. We usually do irrigate it once per crop, so that's about once a month that alfalfa gets irrigated during the summer months. It's a very high yielding crop. It's perennial, which means that we only plant it once every 5 to 7 years, and we can harvest it over and over and over. This helps with our carbon footprint. We're not burning diesel, we're not tilling the soil, we're not prepping the soil like we would for an annual crop. And so as a perennial, that helps with our carbon footprint. It's very water efficient in terms of calories and protein and fiber. So alfalfa is an animal feed product. It supports our dairy, beef, lamb industry. Also for those of us that have horses, we use it as well. Lynn, we're looking at you. Candace, yes. We feed alfalfa. So in terms of the water that alfalfa takes to produce calories, fiber, and protein, it's very efficient with the water that it uses, and we get a very valuable feed product for our animals. We get multiple harvests per year. Depending on where you're at in the state, 4 to 5 harvests per year. It can control wind and water erosion because it's a plant that spreads out. Alfalfa is perfectly suited to Utah's climate. It needs temperature variations to thrive. So it needs hot, dry days and cooler nights that we experience here in the desert. And alfalfa loves salty soils, which is wonderful for us here in the Great Salt Lake Basin. It thrives in salty soils and does really well in the salts that a lot of other crops do not do well in. It's a very salt tolerant crop. Alfalfa is nitrogen fixing. So what that means is it pulls nitrogen from the atmosphere and through the roots, it fixes it into the soil through a process called nodulation. So it forms these nodules of nitrogen that other crops can use. Very regularly following an alfalfa crop, a producer does not have to apply any commercial nitrogen fertilizer to a corn crop because alfalfa has put it in the soil out of the atmosphere. So we can reduce our fertilizer use for alfalfa crops, greatly reduce that. We have wonderfully established markets in Utah. There's only 11 states in the United States where you can grow alfalfa. I don't know if some of you caught the news story about the Colorado River. They talked about alfalfa, why they don't grow it in the Midwest. In the news it said it's because they can grow higher value crops like corn and soybeans, which is part of the equation. The other part of the equation is it rains too much to grow alfalfa. We need long periods of hot, dry temperatures to be able to cure it. So when we cut it, we leave it in big windrows and then we roll it over and let the atmosphere dry it and then bale it. And in the Midwest where they get 40 inches of rain, you don't have the opportunity to get alfalfa dry like we do here in the Western United States. We have an international reputation for the alfalfa that we grow here in Utah. It does not all go to China. About 18% of our alfalfa is shipped internationally. 50% is used here in the state of Utah to support our fabulous beef and lamb and dairy markets. And then the remaining goes to other states in the United States. A lot goes to Texas, a lot goes to California. Alfalfa has allelopathic properties, which means that it puts a chemical in the soil that won't allow other plants to grow. So we can greatly reduce our pesticide use with alfalfa. And it's also a low risk of becoming invasive around the state so that when we're ready to be done with it, we can move on to another crop, and it's stored that nitrogen in the soil for us. So we love alfalfa. We grow it for a reason, and it checks all of these boxes, and it is really the sweetheart of forages, like you can see here. It's a wonderful product that doesn't use a ton of water, like it's talked about, maybe 28 to 32 inches of water a year, which is very similar to your lawn throughout the course of the summer is what alfalfa consumes in the course of the year. So if any of you would like this information, I have cards printed with this on it, so hit me up if you want one. Another question I get asked a lot really quickly is what else do we grow in Utah? Just a snapshot of some of the products that we grow. As you know, we have a great tart cherry production, peaches, onions, a lot of small grains, winter wheat and barley. We have a lot of wonderful locally produced vegetable products. We grow corn. Up in Box Elder County, we grow mint, spearmint, and peppermint that's used in your toothpaste and gum and all of the other things. So we do have a wide variety of crops that we grow. Yes, alfalfa is number one because as we get out of the Wasatch Front and into even saltier soils in the central and southern parts of our state, it really is what's thriving there. We're also losing some of our prime and unique farm ground where we can grow peaches, and we have our orchards and our vegetable productions along the benches of the Wasatch Front with some of the best farmland that we had, and that is getting covered, and so we're doing the best with what we have, and alfalfa is a great product for that. So to talk just a little bit at a glance of the water optimization program and what we've done, and then kind of where we've been and where we hope to go. So to date, $276 million has been allocated to the program. And since 2019, we've been able to fund 551 projects. And then we have obligated about $113 million. I also like to point out that the water optimization program is intended to be everything for everyone. We understand Great Salt Lake is a catalyst for the large dollar investments that we've had, but we have very unique water situations in the Colorado River that we're trying to help with, on the Sevier River in southern Utah, and so we really are trying to spread the love and share the dollars and help tackle some of the unique challenges that we have statewide. Couple of things that I'll mention is of those 551 projects, we have 126 that are complete. Those projects have all installed a real-time flow meter. So as Teresa talked about and others have talked about the data, this is the first time ever that we are measuring water use at the farm level. That doesn't mean that it's been the Wild West. Our canal and irrigation companies are metered as they pull water into their systems, but farm per farm or field per field, we've never measured water use like we have with this program. And so all of the projects have real-time flow meters installed. And then jumping down, 24 of our 551 projects have been completed and in use for a full irrigation season. And why that matters is that that's when we start looking at the data and looking at reporting from our farmers. And so we have these huge dollars and these huge number of projects, but we want the project to be in use for a full irrigation season before we start collecting data to give us a full range of what has happened. And even more than one irrigation season is better. And so I show this to say that we're just barely getting started. Yes, we've had a lot of dollars. Yes, we've had a lot of investments into the water optimization program, but in terms of projects that are completed, that we're using, that we're monitoring, we're just barely getting started, and we're really looking forward to more of that information to be able to share with you. And then we've paid out about $26 million, and then just show you really quick some of the projects that we've done. It depends on where you're at around the state. Like I mentioned, in the northern part of the state, in the Great Salt Lake Basin, we're doing a lot of flood irrigation. So that's these pipe and riser systems. So we're taking open ditches, putting them in a pipe, and then these risers are used to deliver water to the field. So you just pop them off, and the water bubbles out of the pipe and floods across the field. We have automated irrigation systems that these are automated that you can run with your phone that will open this valve. You can turn it on and it will flood across your field. We've done a lot of work with our irrigation and canal companies. We're getting telemetered gates and automated gates. This is a big pumping station up in Cache Valley. We're doing canal linings, drip systems, canal piping, and then in other parts of the state, we're doing these nozzle packages on pivots that are a drop nozzle or a LISA or a LIPA system that drops the nozzle closer to the ground to reduce evaporation. So you name it, we're doing it, and it depends on where you're at in the state. I get asked a lot, like, what's the poster child project? And it really depends, because we irrigate so differently around the state of Utah. Senate Bill 277 established a new committee that governs the water optimization program. And I just show you this list to give a nod to the heavy hitters that we have on this committee and the seriousness we take in the program. These are the people that are governing and making rule and policy and helping us guide the program where we need it to be in the future, and I appreciate their help. I always like to point out that Brett Bunker, Jeff Hardy, Brandon Yardley, and Jason Morgan are all full-time farmers that make their living exclusively from agriculture. So we're very grateful to have a large agricultural presence on that committee to help drive the program as a benefit to our producers. So where we're going, the committee made new ranking criteria and priority areas. We change those every year, or we look at those every year and evaluate them. Some of the big changes that we made in this last application period was that we took our irrigation and canal companies and had them rank separately from on-farm projects. That's a huge bang for our buck as we're able to work with our irrigation and canal companies. And so we felt like they needed to compete against each other versus on-farm projects. Canal companies can now ask for up to $1 million for a project, where on-farm projects can get up to $500,000. It's a 50-50 cost share. For either on-farm or canals, and then our ranking priorities included project types. If you're familiar with Senate Bill 277, it made some buckets of money that were priority projects like subsurface drip, automated surge, canal improvements was a bucket, automation and telemetry was a bucket. So we made those buckets priority projects. The location, our applicants got points if they were in the Great Salt Lake Basin. They got a higher ranking score. The potential that the application had for a depletion reduction or a diversion reduction or a combination of both. And then if the applicant was interested in filing a change application, that also gave extra points there. So just a snapshot of this last application period that just closed in January. This was the first application that we've had under Senate Bill 277. You can see some of the statistics there. Of note, there's been some questions. We had 5 applicants indicate that they would be filing a change application for saved water. Most of those resided with our irrigation companies. 237 applications of the 389 were located in the Great Salt Lake Basin. And then one thing I like to point out that kind of nods to the maps that I show you, nearly 50% of all of the applications that we received statewide, 50% came from Box Elder, Cache, and Rich counties combined. So our farmers there are extremely interested in participating in this program and being a part of the solution to help better utilize our water in the state and better utilize our precious resource. So now what? Where do we go next? And I think that's been a common thread is that it's really complicated. We're really excited at the end of this irrigation season. We're gonna have a lot more annual reports come in that can show the water use at the farm level. As we improve our irrigation methods, it helps our farmers through drought resilience, which really benefits all of us. As our farmers can be more drought resilient, if cuts come or reductions in water use come, it helps them to maintain their viable farming operations. We have a huge question of water shareholders versus water right holders. Just to skim the surface, about 80% of all of our applicants have water shares. So they are not actual water right holders that can then file a change application. They are shareholders within an irrigation company. So we are working closely with our irrigation companies to look at some of the things that we can do. We talk about junior water rights versus senior water rights. If somebody installs an ag optimization system and saves water and it just goes down the ditch for somebody else to use, that's something that we need to look at and overcome. And there's various complex situations. One thing we're excited about that these systems allow us to do is capitalize on the wet years like we've been having. We up on the Bear River, in the Bear River Canal Company, our canal's not even on yet. And because it's been so wet and we've had these wet storms that have come through, and we haven't even had to turn our irrigation water on yet. So how can we capitalize on that and make sure that some of that excess water goes to the lake? I took this picture. This is a project. This is the very end of the main trunk line of the Bear River Canal. This is a telemetered gate that we just installed barely like a month ago. And this will show us what's leaving the canal. Out here is the Chesapeake Duck Club beyond the canal. So it is the wetland of the canal. So we can show this is what we pulled out of Cutler and this is what is going back into the system, and we're excited to be able to show that. Really quick, I like to show this slide of the water budget. I think it helps us to keep a good perspective of the water that ag is using. This is on the back of my alfalfa card if you want one. And with that, I appreciate your time today. You do have time for no, I'll stay up here. Okay, one question. Who's the lucky taker? I know you're all hungry, so. Okay, really?
You said
yeah.
U.S. is importing more food, but you didn't mention what Utah is. How does Utah plan that? What is our food production? What's making the state?
Yeah, thank you. That's a wonderful question. It is, what is Utah doing specifically in terms of import and export? The only thing that we are excess on in the state of Utah is protein. That's the only thing we produce more of in the state of Utah than we consume, and our protein products through beef and lamb and dairy. So we're importing everything else in the state, all of the other things we consume. Okay, thank you.
Hannah, you rock. Yeah. Okay, it's lunch, and we'll see you back here in an hour.